Today is day 338 of the October 7th war. We're still learning more about the terrorist attack from this morning. 3 Israeli men were murdered on the border between Jordan and Israel. A terrorist in Jordan drove a truck to the border crossing known as Allenby Bridge. He got out of his truck and opened fire at the men. Israel and Jordan have been at peace for 30 years. The government of Jordan cooperates with Israel. Jordan receives much of its water supply from Israel. In fact, it works to prevent attacks against Israel, whereas Israel works to prevent attacks against Jordan. Jordan helped shoot Iranian missiles out of the sky before they could reach Israel. The real problem in the region is the current Iranian regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran wants to overthrow the Jordanian monarchy. In fact, it has been flooding Jordan with weapons and working relentlessly to strengthen the extremist Hamas terrorist organization inside of Jordan with weapons, funding, logistics, and training that will be used in attacks against Israel and against the Jordanian regime itself. Israel and Jordan have their differences, but they must work together to counter the Iranian regime's efforts to burn the entire region. In the Islamic Republic of Iran's current multi-front war against Israel, Jordan is in fact aligned strategically with Israel and the West. Jordan repeatedly warned the Iranian regime against violating Jordanian territory in any future attacks on Israel and in general. What happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. For example, the Islamic Republic of Iran is helping Russia kill Ukrainians. The Wall Street Journal reported that Iran sent Russia over 200 ballistic missiles. A Ukrainian defense source warned that if civilians in Ukraine die from these missiles, then Iran will pay a double price for that. The response will be severe, they say. People throughout the world have already been killed by weapons provided by the Islamic Republic of Iran, just like the hundreds of thousands that Iran's proxy armies killed in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and just like the thousands of US and Western troops stationed in the region. The Iranian regime isn't just attacking Israel, it's setting the entire Middle East on fire. And after years of preparations, it is now trying to burn European cities too. The missiles and drones that the Islamic Republic of Iran attacks Israel with are the same missiles and drones that Russia uses to attack Ukraine with. It is key to understand that the threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran is very, very real. Tehran's massive ballistic missile attack on Israel in April was the second biggest ballistic missile attack in history after Russia's missile attack on Ukraine in the first hours of that war. These missiles can reach all of Israel and parts of Europe and are estimated to reach 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers. That includes Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, even as far as the Ukraine. Now, in a cowardly fashion, the Islamic Republic of Iran does not usually do this directly, as it prefers not to suffer the direct consequences, but has others do their dirty work for them and have the countries which house their proxies suffer the consequences. Israel and NATO face a common threat in the current Iranian regime. Standing with Israel is standing for a secure Middle East, a secure Europe, and a secure future for humanity. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Ruth, you mentioned that the Jordanian monarchy is aligned with Israel and the West. Can you explain some of the differences between the Jordanian monarchy and the Jordanian people as far as their attitudes toward Israel go, and also why the Queen of Jordan is constantly on Western television berating Israel.
Okay, so the Jordanian policy is, on the one hand, in fact, declaratively anti-Israeli, whereas de facto, and as I've just said, there is a lot of cooperation. For example, Israel provides Jordan almost all of its drinking water. Israel also cooperates on a consistent basis over a long period of time and works closely with the Jordanian forces on the security of Jordan, which is, by the way, very, very important for the West and for the US, because it's a teeny tiny little country, in fact, between Israel and the Iranian-influenced countries such as Iraq and so on the other side. It's very important for the West that Iran does not influence Jordan and does not have that consistent strip of territory without Jordan to break it as a buffer. That's first of all. Now, the Jordanians berate Israel, including the Queen, who herself is Palestinian, as 70 or 80% of the population in Jordan, 70% Palestinian. In fact, before the separation of Israel in 1948, before the State of Israel was established, there was a suggestion to make Jordan the State of Israel, as well as some parts of Israel, former Israeli establishment. But then the UK and other factors in the international arena allowed Jordan to become its own republic, putting the Hashemite kingdom in charge and on top to rule that kingdom. But the population in its vast majority was and remains Palestinian. Now, what happens is every single year during the month of Ramadan, we actually have Hamas making a lot of noise and a lot of difficulty for the entire region, but particularly for the Israeli troops in Al-Aqsa, in Jerusalem, saying that Israel is occupying Jerusalem and occupying the holy, the Dome of the Rock, and so on and so forth. It's not true, but what they're trying to do is galvanize support amidst the Muslim world, saying that Israel is trying to overtake the Holy of Holies. What does Jordan do? In fact, Jordan is in charge of Al-Aqsa. Jordan is the caretaker of Al-Aqsa because it is, by the Islam, the Sunni Islam, the rightful protector of Al-Aqsa in the Islamic Sunni world. But does it fight the Hamas that tries to take away from Jordan the ownership of Al-Aqsa? No. It tries to win back the support of its own people so they don't overthrow the throne by shouting louder than the Hamas against Israel. That's why the Queen berates Israel. That's why the Jordanian regime always criticizes Israel. But as I said, that's declaratively, because they want to show that they are holier than the Hamas, that they are stronger than the strongest protectors, so-called, of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But in fact, they have a strategic security interest to cooperate with Israel, to cooperate with the West, to cooperate with the United States of America. So there's a duality in the policy between the regime and what it says and the actual policy de facto every day.
The IDF announced early this morning that overnight and this morning about 50 rockets were fired from Lebanon, including about 20 toward the city of Kiryat Shmona in the north. Can you say a bit about the situation in the city of Kiryat Shmona in the north? Is anyone living there? And what hope can the residents of northern Israel have for returning now? Today, it's 11 months exactly since Hezbollah opened fire in the October 7th war.
Thank you for bringing the north of Israel back onto the map. This is very, very important. And in a hypocritical fashion, the world seems to have forgotten the tens of thousands of inhabitants from the north of Israel. And I'm talking about The proper Israel, undisputed Israel, in the villages and in the towns of northern Israel have been displaced, cannot properly start their schooling in their own places, and their hometowns are simply evacuated. Why? Because Hezbollah, that has taken hostage the Lebanese people inside Lebanon, they are being directed by a complete foreign entity called the Islamic Republic of Iran. They've taken over Lebanon by Hezbollah, and this Hezbollah, at the ask of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is bombarding civilians in Israel for 11 whole months. Nobody speaks of that. Nobody criticizes that. The entire world is silent. Why? Because people are not dying. First of all, people are dying. People do get hurt. But the Israeli government, as opposed to other regimes, like, for example, Hamas, take every precaution they can to protect their citizens, whereas it's evacuation, whereas it's security rooms, whereas it's certain technology that protects from ballistic missiles. But that doesn't take away the issue that the Hezbollah has been bombarding the north of the country for months on end. What can be done? Hezbollah needs to be removed from the border. Now, let me just explain for 1 second what it means. There is a United Nations international force called UNIFIL, so-called, supposedly there, between Israel and Lebanon to take away that kind of threat. Does it do it? No, because Hezbollah threatens the UN Special Forces UNIFIL as well and do not let them perform their task. So, does anybody raise questions about that? No. Are there any discussions about that in the United Nations? No. Is there any other country that would agree to have an Islamic Republic of Iran proxy on top of its border with no man's land in between, literally on top of people's houses, literally shooting and killing people all the time? Obviously not. This is something which nobody could even fathom or comprehend. And this is the hypocritical nature of the situation. So thank you for bringing up the issue on the north of the country and bringing up with newspapers, with social media, with your Congress people or voted electives. This is key for people to understand. Nobody else is speaking about it.
This is a question that comes from our Instagram Live. Can you explain the government of Israel's calculations that it made when it decided to send polio vaccines into Gaza at a time when Hamas continues to hold Israeli hostages?
So I'd like to open and say that I'm not a spokesperson for the Israeli current political party or government, but any Israeli government that would be elected in this country would, as it always does, care for the civilians of Gaza. It has done so before and allowed for vaccinations to take place before. These are, in fact, the second batch of vaccinations that Israel provided in coordination with international organizations in order to make sure that there is no breakup of or a breakout of polio amidst Palestinian children, because no Israeli has an interest of killing any Palestinian children. On the contrary, we would not hurt one Palestinian child in Gaza if it were not for the Hamas hiding behind schools and clinics and hospitals and other civilian installations and inhabitations. This is exactly what the Hamas wants, for Israel to retaliate into civilian, highly populated areas. But Israel takes every single measure of caution not to hurt civilians and to try and help them. That's why we bring in trucks and loadfuls of humanitarian aid. That's why there's a lot of food and humanitarian aid going in, most of which is taken, in fact, stolen by the Hamas operatives by literally, physically hurting their own civilians. And that is why Israel is, in fact, vaccinating the Palestinian children population inside Gaza.
Our last question today is from Sammy, who's watching on YouTube Live. Can you speak about the reports that Sinwar was planning to escape with Israeli hostages to Iran through the Philadelphia corridor? And maybe you can add also a bit about the latest in the hostage negotiations between Israel, Hamas, and the mediators.
So very clearly, there is no confirmation or a kind of a possibility to say whether this is true or not. This has been published, and according to some sources, Sinwar, in fact, was hoping to run away to Iran via the Philadelphia line, either underground via the tunnels or above ground, where some of the weapons were being smuggled above ground in the Philadelphia crossing. Currently, when Israeli soldiers are stationed there, this is impossible, of course, but before they were stationed there, there was a talk of him wanting, and also some kind of a documentation, which I cannot confirm. However, the will of Sinwar is to hold on to human hostages, civilian hostages, in order to trade with them for their own interests, not human interests, not for the betterment of the Palestinian people, but for the armament of a terrorist organization, the Hamas, to get the crossing open again and to be able to smuggle weapons again, not to create sustainable sources of income for the people and employment opportunities. On the contrary, to be able to smuggle more weapons and attack Israel again and again, which they themselves say on interviews in Arabic. Thank you so much for being with us today. And please come back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time. We're looking forward to having you again.